What if one day you simply disappeared? Would anyone notice? Would they even care? The truth is, most people don't truly recognize the impact of your presence until it's gone. We often don't realize how much we mean to others until we step back and leave them to reflect on what they've lost. When you disappear, the reactions of those around you can be incredibly telling. The emotions that surface in your absence reveal how much you've been valued or how much you've been taken for granted. In this video, we're going to explore the 9 powerful emotions people experience when you suddenly remove yourself from their lives. Each of these emotions tells a deeper story about how they've perceived you all along. Let's dive into 1. Rejection. Rejection isn't just an action, it's a silent declaration that you are no longer under control. When you step away from someone's life, your absence becomes more than just a void. It is a sharp sting to their ego, forcing them to confront the uncomfortable truth that they've lost the upper hand. This realization isn't just about missing your presence, it's about the power they once thought they held slipping away. In relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, people often take your presence for granted. They assume you'll always be there, always bending to their needs and adjusting to their schedules. But when you finally decide to walk away, the balance shifts. Suddenly, they are forced to confront a new reality where their control over the dynamic has evaporated. The frustration that follows is not just about your absence, it's the unsettling feeling that they've been left behind, as if the ground beneath them has shifted unexpectedly. Picture this in any given relationship. There is someone who always seems to have the upper hand. They expect you to prioritize them, to be available whenever they need, and to accommodate their desires without question. But then, one day, you decide enough is enough. You pull away. And in that instant, the dynamic transforms. The security they once felt, built on the assumption that you would always be there, suddenly evaporates. It leaves them grappling with a loss that goes beyond mere physical presence. They begin to feel an overwhelming sense of abandonment, not because you've changed, but because they realize they've lost the power they once held. This shift in power is profound. The act of stepping back isn't just about withdrawing, it's about forcing them to see what they've been overlooking all along. They're suddenly faced with a version of you they've ignored, perhaps for far too long. You're no longer the person who bends to their will, and this realization leaves them feeling vulnerable. It's a wake-up call they didn't see coming, and the discomfort it brings is undeniable. Think about a professional situation. Your colleague has always relied on you to carry the extra load, assuming you'll be there to pick up the slack. They've grown accustomed to you stepping in whenever they fall short, never stopping to appreciate how much you contribute. But when you stop offering that support, the dynamic shifts dramatically. They're no longer frustrated just by the work piling up, they're grappling with the revelation that they depended on you far more than they were willing to admit. The rejection they feel is not just personal, but a sudden and undeniable shift in the power they thought they had. So what happens next? Rejection forces people to rethink the dynamic. Some may start to appreciate the value you brought to their lives, while others may react with defensiveness, refusing to acknowledge their missteps. Regardless of their response, one thing is clear: the power has shifted. By stepping back, you're not just creating distance, you're reclaiming control over your own life, your own time, and your own worth. This isn't about vengeance or spite, it's about self-respect. Now, ask yourself, how often have you been too available for those who don't truly value your presence? How many times have you allowed others to take you for granted, giving more than you've received in return? It's time to step back, to remove yourself from situations where your worth is overlooked and your efforts go unappreciated. In doing so, you're not just walking away, you're taking back control of your future and reaffirming your value. Rejection, then, isn't about disappearing. It's about forcing others to see what they've been missing. When you step away from those who take you for granted, you're giving them a powerful wake-up call. You're no longer allowing them to undervalue you, and in doing so, you're reestablishing your own self-worth. So take a moment to reflect. Are you giving too much of yourself to those who don't appreciate it? If so, it's time to take control. Step away from situations where your value isn't recognized. This isn't an act of retaliation, it's an act of self-respect. Don't wait. You are the one in charge of your future. Start making changes today. 2. Emptiness. When you disappear, the emptiness you leave behind is not just a physical absence, but a profound void that overtakes the lives of those who once took you for granted. After the initial sting of rejection fades, what remains is an undeniable hollow space. The energy, support, and consistency you provided were once woven seamlessly into their daily lives. Without you, those threads have unraveled, leaving them to confront the stark reality of what they've lost. In relationships, whether personal or professional, it's common for people to assume that someone who is always there will continue to be there without question. Your presence becomes a constant, an unspoken assurance that you will be available to listen, to help, and to care. It's a comforting routine for them, but one they rarely pause to appreciate. However, when you finally step away, a shift occurs. The conversations that once filled their days, the emotional support that provided comfort, suddenly disappear. The void left behind is more than noticeable, it is unsettling, forcing them to face how much they had come to rely on you without ever acknowledging it. Imagine a friend who always turned to you for emotional support. For them, your presence was a given, a reliable source of validation and advice. They leaned on you, expecting you to absorb their worries and calm their fears, without ever questioning whether you'd always be there. But when you step back, the silence is striking. Every missed call, every text that goes unanswered, serves as a reminder of just how much they depended on you. The emotional safety net they once took for granted has vanished, leaving them to wrestle with the emptiness that now fills its place. It's not just about the loss of your presence, it's about the realization that they had come to rely on your care without ever truly appreciating it. The void they feel is not just a physical gap, it is a mirror reflecting the role you played in their lives, a role they failed to fully recognize. Your absence forces them to confront the uncomfortable truth that they didn't just lose your company, but the stability and emotional support that came with it. The quietness in their routine echoes with the things left unsaid, the moments they took without giving anything in return. The emptiness they now experience is not only a loss, it's a reckoning, a stark reminder of what they let slip away. In a professional setting, the same dynamic unfolds. Picture a colleague who always depended on you to handle the extra tasks, to step in when things got tough. They assumed you would always be there to pick up the slack, never truly acknowledging your contributions. But when you pull back, they're left to face the reality of your absence. It's not just the workload that overwhelms them, it's the dawning realization that they relied on you far more than they ever admitted. The void left behind is a testament to your unseen efforts that went unappreciated until you were no longer there to provide them. As they begin to grapple with this emptiness, you are left with something even more valuable: clarity. By stepping away, you've created the space for them to reflect on what they've lost. But more importantly, you've created space for yourself to recognize your own worth. The emptiness they feel is their burden to carry, not yours. By choosing to step back, you've reclaimed control over your time, your energy, and your value. Take a moment to reflect who in your life would feel this emptiness if you stepped away. What relationships have you maintained where your presence is taken for granted without reciprocation? By stepping back from these dynamics, you allow both them and yourself to see clearly. Not only do you give them the opportunity to realize what they've lost, but you also give yourself the freedom to understand your own worth on a deeper level. It's in this space of emptiness that true clarity begins to unfold. 3. Curiosity. There's something about disappearing that leaves more than just a void. It creates a puzzle that demands to be solved. Your sudden absence doesn't merely fade into the background. Instead, it gnaws at their mind, like a missing piece in a once complete puzzle. They don't just miss you anymore, they are driven by a need to understand why you left. Curiosity begins to creep in, relentless, obsessive, and all-consuming. As time passes, they start to realize that your absence isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, and most significantly, unanswered. The silence you've left behind begins to echo louder than any words ever could. Each day without you feels like a missed opportunity to understand what went wrong. Where are you? What are you doing? Why did you disappear? These questions, at first small, begin to multiply, spreading through their thoughts like wildfire until they are consumed by one overriding goal: to find out the truth. Their curiosity pushes them to search for answers in places they never thought they would. They scroll through your old social media posts, reread your past conversations, even ask mutual friends for any clues about what might have happened. But the more they search, the fewer answers they find. The void you left has become a puzzle they can't stop trying to solve. As their curiosity deepens, it turns into something almost painful. They can't help but replay old memories over and over in their mind, analyzing every word, every gesture, every shared glance. Was there something they missed? Was there a subtle sign they overlooked? Did they do something wrong that led to this silence, or was it something they failed to do? These questions weigh heavily on them, driving their need for closure. In their quest for answers, they become obsessed with piecing together where things shifted, and more importantly, if there's a way to reverse it. Yet, no matter how hard they try, they can't find the answers without you. It's no longer just about your absence, but about understanding the reason behind it, the meaning of the silence that now hangs between you. Think about how people react when they can no longer reach someone they once had constant access to. It's not just the absence that bothers them, it's the mystery. They go through your social media, scroll through old posts, overanalyze photos, search for clues, replaying past conversations in their minds. Every unanswered question becomes fuel for their growing obsession, feeding the need to know more. But here's where your power lies: your silence is the answer. The longer you remain quiet, the louder your absence becomes in their minds. They are left to sit with their own questions, to grapple with their discomfort, to try and fill in the blanks without any help from you. And in doing so, they begin to realize just how significant your presence truly was. The control is now yours. By withholding the answers they desperately seek, you force them to confront their own curiosity. Sometimes, the most powerful statement is the one left unsaid. In resisting the urge to explain or clarify, you leave them with a lingering sense of wonder that only grows with time. This is the brilliance of silence. It speaks volumes when used with intention. Curiosity is not just born out of longing, it's driven by the mind's relentless need to fill in the gaps when left in the dark. The silence you've created demands their attention, their thoughts, and their energy. And in this moment, that silence is your strongest tool. So stay silent. Resist the urge to provide the answers they're desperate for. Let them wonder, let them sit with their curiosity, and allow it to grow. The more they search for answers, the more they'll come to realize just how important your presence was. Silence, when used wisely, can be your most powerful weapon in making them remember what they've lost. For self-reflection. It's often not until you're gone that people realize the full impact of their actions, or more accurately, their inactions. When you choose to remove yourself from situations where your efforts are undervalued, those left behind are forced to confront the void you leave. Your absence becomes an undeniable reminder that you were contributing far more than they ever acknowledged. This realization doesn't happen overnight. Instead, it comes through a slow, often painful process of self-reflection. After the initial phases of rejection, emptiness, and curiosity have subsided, those left behind begin a more introspective journey. With no immediate answers or closure to cling to, they turn inward, evaluating their own actions. They start to question how they might have contributed to the situation, and eventually realize that your absence wasn't some sudden, inexplicable event, it was a direct consequence of their behavior. As this understanding sinks in, they are confronted with the uncomfortable truth that they may have neglected or mistreated you. and that this neglect was what ultimately pushed you away. Imagine a colleague who constantly expected you to pick up the slack but never acknowledged your efforts. You handled extra responsibilities, took on tasks that should have been theirs, yet you remained invisible in their eyes. When you finally leave the company or move to a different team, they begin to notice the gaps in productivity, in collaboration, and in support. At first, they might not connect the dots, attributing these gaps to general workplace issues or external factors. But over time, as the team struggles and tensions rise, they are forced to reflect on the dynamic they once had with you. In moments of quiet self-reflection, they start recalling all the times they dismissed your contributions, or worse, took credit for your work. They remember the many opportunities they had to express gratitude or offer help but failed to do so. It is only in your absence that they begin to understand how their actions or inaction gradually pushed you away. This realization is not easy, but it is an essential part of their growth. Your departure becomes the mirror in which they finally see their own flaws. As this reflection deepens, they start to realize how much they took you for granted. Memories that once seemed inconsequential now sting with clarity. Their assumptions that you would always be there, always willing to carry the load, now seem foolish. They come to understand that their neglect or mistreatment wasn't just unfair, it was damaging. Your absence forces them to acknowledge that their behavior had real, tangible consequences, and in doing so, they are presented with an opportunity to grow. Take, for example, a personal relationship in which one person consistently undervalues the emotional support of the other. You were always there, offering comfort, advice, and companionship, but your efforts were seldom reciprocated. Eventually, you make the difficult decision to step back, realizing that the relationship is draining you. In your absence, they might initially feel confused or even resentful, but as time passes and they face challenges without your support, they start to reflect on their own actions. Perhaps they recall moments when you reached out for help, but they were too preoccupied to notice your needs. They may remember times when you provided unwavering emotional support, yet they failed to show up for you. It is during this period of self-reflection that they confront an uncomfortable but necessary truth: you were an essential part of their life, and they failed to appreciate it until it was too late. Your absence becomes a catalyst for their self-awareness, forcing them to recognize the ways in which they undervalued you. The reflection they see is sharp, unavoidable, and painful. They must now face the reality that they took you for granted, and the value you provided wasn't fully appreciated until you were no longer there. The consequences of their actions are now clear, and they are left with the weight of that realization. Take this as a sign that it's okay to step back from relationships, whether personal, professional, or social, that drain you. Allow those who have neglected or undervalued you to go through their own process of reflection while you focus on investing in your own growth. Their self-reflection is not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to yourself. Use this time to prioritize your own needs and development, and let them come to terms with their mistakes on their own. This space is where you reclaim your power, where you grow into a version of yourself that no longer tolerates being underappreciated. Ultimately, you have the right to step away, to choose yourself, and to leave behind those who do not value what you bring to the table. Let your absence speak for itself. In time, those who failed to appreciate you will reflect, and while their growth may be slow and their regret deep, you will have already moved forward, stronger and more self-assured than before. 5. The urge to pursue. There's nothing quite as powerful as the realization that someone you once took for granted has walked away. When the people who once overlooked your presence begin to reflect on their actions, they start to see how their behavior led to your absence. That's when an undeniable urge to pursue follows. It's no longer just about missing you, it becomes the awareness that they need you back in their lives. Along with this realization comes the desire to correct their past mistakes. But now, the dynamic has changed. The power they once held, believing you would always be there, has shifted into your hands. They understand now that they can no longer take you for granted. This time they'll have to work hard to regain your attention and trust. Think about that friend who ghosted you or gradually drifted away, assuming you'd always be available when they were ready to reconnect. They felt comfortable thinking you'd be waiting in the wings. But now, things are different. Suddenly, you begin receiving long, heartfelt texts or social media messages. They reach out, apologizing, trying to rekindle the connection. What's different this time is that you are no longer the one waiting. You've moved on, invested in yourself, and grown beyond the need for their validation. The tables have turned, and now they're the ones working to regain a place in your life. Their pursuit is not just about saying sorry, it's a recognition of what they lost. They realize that the person they once overlooked now holds the key to whether they can be part of your life again. You are no longer in a position of vulnerability, hoping for their return. Instead, they understand that they must prove their worth. It's not about holding a grudge or playing mind games, it's about them finally seeing your value, the value they ignored for far too long. As they try to make amends, you'll notice a clear shift in the balance of power. No longer are you the one seeking their attention, trying to hold on to the relationship. Now, they are the ones who must earn back your trust. They've come to realize that their past behavior, taking you for granted and assuming you'd always be there, won't work anymore. This time, they have to show through consistent actions, not just empty words, that they've truly understood what they lost and are willing to make things right. Imagine a friend who once distanced themselves from you, thinking they could reconnect whenever it suited them. They ignored your texts, canceled plans, and assumed you'd always be around when they finally needed something. But suddenly, they're sending long, apologetic messages, trying to repair the damage. They know they've lost something valuable, and now they want to make up for it. However, this time it's different. You're the one who decides if, when, and how they're allowed back into your life. The balance has shifted, and now you're in control. It's up to them to prove they've learned from their mistakes. Letting them pursue you isn't about being spiteful or playing with their emotions. It's about holding firm to the respect and boundaries you've set for yourself. Their pursuit acknowledges your worth, something they failed to see before. This is their chance to show you they've grown, but it's also your opportunity to stand strong in the self-respect you've built. You are no longer the person who waits, hoping for their attention. Now, you decide if they are worth letting back in. There's no need to rush back into their lives. Let them chase. Let them prove, through real effort and action, that they truly understand what they lost. Be discerning with your time and energy, and only allow people back into your life who genuinely contribute to your growth and well-being. The longer they pursue, the more they'll come to realize that your presence is not something to be taken for granted. It's a privilege, not a given. Now, you set the terms, and that's the ultimate shift in power. 6. The battle between relief and regret. At first, when someone causes your disappearance, they might feel a sense of relief. They convince themselves that your absence provides the space they needed, or that the relationship wasn't as important as it seemed. For a moment, it feels like a burden has been lifted, a chance to breathe and step away from the emotional weight they believed was holding them down. In that brief moment, they feel free, liberated from responsibilities they once carried. But relief is fleeting. As time passes, the true weight of your absence begins to settle in, and that feeling of lightness starts to fade. The emptiness you've left behind grows heavier, and they start to realize that what they lost was far more significant than they initially acknowledged. What once seemed like a necessary escape now transforms into something much harder to carry: regret. Slowly, they come to understand that in their pursuit of space, they have lost something irreplaceable. Picture a partner who insisted on needing space or a break at first. They revel in the perceived freedom, no emotional connection to manage, no responsibilities to share. They might even believe that distancing themselves from you was the right decision, that it was necessary for their well-being. For a while, they enjoy this newfound solitude, feeling unburdened and at peace with their choice. But then, as the days and weeks slip by, things begin to change. They start noticing the gaps you left behind, the small moments of support, the easy conversations, the quiet understanding that came so naturally with you. The silence that once felt like freedom now begins to feel like isolation. The relief they once held onto starts to crumble, and they realize that in seeking distance, they pushed away someone who mattered more than they realized. Regret always follows relief when someone loses something they didn't fully understand they needed. It's part of the human experience. People often don't recognize the depth of a connection until it's gone. The initial relief was just a defense mechanism, a way to protect themselves from the emotional consequences of their actions. But as the reality of your absence sinks in, regret begins to take its place. The value of your presence, which wasn't clear to them in the moment, now becomes undeniable. They find themselves grappling with the realization that they didn't appreciate what they had until it was too late. This battle between relief and regret is the tipping point. It's in this internal conflict that they come face to face with the consequences of their decisions. The regret they now feel weighs heavily on them, but it's a burden they must carry on their own. You cannot and should not alleviate it for them. Letting them feel the full weight of their regret is essential. It's not your responsibility to ease their discomfort or relieve them of the emotional consequences of their choices. They need to sit with their feelings and face the reality of what they've lost. Only by experiencing this regret can they truly grow from it. By staying out of it and allowing them to carry this burden, you give them the opportunity to learn a lesson they won't soon forget. Meanwhile, you continue moving forward, free from the emotional weight they once shared with you. Their regret is not yours to bear. As they struggle with the consequences of their actions, you remain focused on your own journey, unburdened by the past. Let them face the reality of their choices while you invest in your future, knowing that sometimes the hardest lessons are the most important ones. 7 Games and manipulation. When self-reflection and regret fail to bring the results they desire, some people turn to games and manipulation as a last-ditch effort to regain control. Unable to influence you directly anymore, they resort to subtle or overt tactics designed to provoke a reaction. This behavior can take many forms: passive-aggressive comments, carefully curated social media posts, or even cryptic messages dropped through mutual friends. The goal is clear: they want you to feel something, whether it's jealousy, regret, or anger. To them, any reaction signifies they still hold some influence over you. But beneath these manipulative strategies lies something deeper: desperation and insecurity. Manipulation becomes their final weapon when they realize they can no longer control you in the way they once did. Picture this: a former romantic partner starts posting photos with someone new, each post tailored to catch your eye. The captions, the settings, the company, they're all chosen with the intention of reminding you of what you've lost. It's not that they've truly moved on, but rather they are trying to provoke a response from you. They want you to feel a pang of jealousy, to question yourself, and, above all, to miss them. They may even send you cryptic messages late at night or share subtle hints through mutual friends in a bid to pull you back into their emotional sphere. But underneath these efforts is not strength, it's weakness, wrapped in a fragile facade. Manipulation, in fact, is the last resort of someone who has lost control. When they can no longer manipulate your decisions or actions directly, they fall back on emotional tricks. This behavior is a reflection of their inability to handle your absence in a mature way. Where they once held power, they now grasp for any reaction, any sign that they still matter to you. But the reality is that their efforts are not about you, they're about them, about their own insecurities and need for validation. They want to feel relevant in your life, but engaging with their manipulations only gives them the satisfaction they crave. And you, wiser and more aware, see through these games for what they are. In many cases, these manipulations might manifest in the digital world, particularly through social media. You might see your ex posting a series of carefully posed photos, showing off a new relationship or flaunting an exciting lifestyle. They tag places that hold meaning for the two of you, or write captions that carry veiled messages. Perhaps they even use mutual friends to drop hints or reach out to you indirectly. All of this is carefully orchestrated to make you feel like you're missing out, to reignite old feelings of jealousy or regret. But the truth is, these attempts are not about strength or moving on. They stem from a place of insecurity. They are trying to provoke a reaction because deep down, they fear being forgotten. At its core, manipulation is not a display of power. Rather, it's a reflection of desperation. People use emotional games because they feel powerless and lack the maturity to face the reality of the situation. Instead of accepting the consequences of their actions, they resort to manipulative behaviors to try to regain control. They want to remind you of their presence, to pull you back into a dynamic where they once had control. But you can see through their games now, and you know that responding will only feed into their desire for relevance. The best response to manipulation is no response at all. Silence is the loudest answer you can give to someone who seeks to control you through emotional games. By refusing to react, whether it's to a passive-aggressive comment or a carefully curated social media post, you maintain your power. Engaging with their tactics only serves to give them the reaction they're seeking. They want you to play their game, to prove that they still have a place in your life. But by choosing not to participate, you make it clear that you're beyond their reach. Letting your silence speak for itself sends a powerful message: you are unbothered, uninterested, and fully in control of your own narrative. The less you engage, the clearer it becomes that their manipulations have no effect on you. Eventually, they'll realize that their tactics aren't working, that no amount of games or tricks can pull you back into their orbit. By refusing to engage, you're not only standing strong in your own independence, but you're also forcing them to confront the fact that they no longer have control over you. Ultimately, people resort to manipulation when they feel they've lost all other means of influence. They use emotional tricks and games to make themselves feel powerful again, but their actions only reveal how powerless they truly are. You have the strength to rise above it. By standing firm in your decision not to engage, you maintain control over your emotions and your life. You show them that their games have no hold on you, and you take back the power they once had. So, the next time someone tries to manipulate you, remember this: your silence is your greatest strength. Let them play their games, but don't be drawn into their world. Stay focused on your own growth, on building a life that is free from the drama and manipulation they bring. In the end, their attempts to provoke you will fade away, while you continue moving forward stronger, wiser, and in control of your own path. 8. The crushing weight of silence. Silence is a powerful force, one that speaks volumes without saying a word. When you maintain your silence long enough, it shifts from being a simple absence to a deafening reminder of your value. As the days stretch into weeks, the impact of your disappearance becomes impossible to ignore. The people who once took you for granted begin to feel the full weight of your absence in every interaction, every project, and every moment they face without your presence. This silence gnaws at them, slowly eroding their confidence and forcing them to confront the reality they once tried to avoid. It's not just that you're gone, it's the fact that your absence has created a void they can no longer fill. Imagine a coworker who never appreciated your contributions during meetings or team projects. They assumed everything would run smoothly, whether you were there or not. But once you leave, your silence becomes glaringly obvious. Meetings lack the clarity and direction you once provided. Projects stall without your input, and the office dynamics shift in subtle yet significant ways. With each passing day, this coworker begins to realize just how crucial your presence was to their success, and the crushing weight of your silence forces them to reflect on how they overlooked your value. Silence, in this case, is not merely the absence of your voice. It is the presence of your worth, standing in stark contrast to the chaos or emptiness left behind. Every day that you remain silent adds more weight, increasing the pressure as they struggle to cope without your guidance, support, or input. What once seemed trivial, your consistent contributions, your steady influence, now looms large in its absence. This silence is a mirror, reflecting their arrogance, pride, and overconfidence. It forces them to see how much they relied on you without ever acknowledging it. Think about that coworker, sitting in a meeting that drags on with no clear direction. The once efficient discussions now feel disorganized. Deadlines begin to slip, and team morale takes a hit. Without your presence, they start to feel the impact of every misstep, every stalled project, every decision that lacks your insight. The silence you've left behind speaks louder than any confrontation could. It is a constant reminder of the void they failed to notice until it was too late. This silence, however, is not about revenge or spite. It's about letting them face the natural consequences of their own actions. They overlooked your worth, and now, in your absence, they must grapple with the harsh reality that they depended on you far more than they realized. The silence you maintain is not a weapon but a testament to your value, one that they can no longer ignore. As the days pass and they begin to feel the crushing weight of your silence, the temptation to reach out, to break the quiet and offer closure will grow. But resist it. Let the silence do the talking for you. Let it be a force that drives them to reflect on their actions and the consequences of taking you for granted. Every moment of silence forces them to understand the depth of their loss. It's not about punishing them, it's about creating space for them to fully grasp what they let slip away. So hold your ground. Keep the silence. Let it crush their pride, their arrogance, until all that remains is the realization of your worth. The urge to explain or step in may be strong, but resist it. Let them come to you, fully aware of the weight your presence once carried. Only then will they truly understand your value. And when they finally do, it will be on your terms. You will have the power to decide if and when they are allowed back into your life. This silence isn't just absence, it is strength, and it is the ultimate testament to your worth. Find fear that brings them back. After enduring the silence and wrestling with their regret, fear becomes the ultimate force that brings them back to you. This fear isn't surface level, it's deep, unsettling, and rooted in the realization that they may have lost you for good. They fear that you've moved on, that someone else has filled the space they once took for granted, and that their chance to make things right is slipping away. It's the fear of permanence, the idea that their mistake might be irreversible, that compels them to reach out, often in desperation, hoping to regain what they carelessly let go. At first, when you disappeared, they might not have been too worried. They convinced themselves that the space you created was what they needed, or that your absence wasn't something to lose sleep over. But as time passed, the quiet grew louder, and they started to realize something far more significant: you might be gone for good. It wasn't just about missing you anymore. The deeper fear crept in, the fear that you had moved on, that someone else was giving you the love and attention they once withheld. That realization hit them hard, shaking the false sense of security they had been holding on to. This fear is more than just a casual worry, it's the profound awareness that they've lost something irreplaceable. The thought that you might not come back, that the door to reconciliation is closing, haunts them. It's not just about missing a friend or a partner, it's the overwhelming fear that you've changed, that the person they once knew is no longer there waiting for them. This fear eats away at them, because they know the chance to make things right might be slipping through their fingers. As this fear intensifies, it drives them to act. They begin reaching out, not with casual or distant messages, but with a sense of urgency. Their calls and texts are filled with emotion, laced with desperation, as they try to gauge where you stand. Are you still there, waiting for them? Or have you moved on entirely? They imagine the worst, that someone else has entered your life, treating you the way they never did, cherishing you in ways they failed to. This fear of being replaced drives them to say and do things they never did before, pushing them to fight for a second chance. Picture an ex who, after weeks of silence, suddenly returns with a plea. The texts they send aren't the light, casual messages of someone testing the waters. They're filled with urgency and vulnerability. They're afraid someone else has stepped into the role they once occupied. The regret they once felt has now turned into panic, and they'll do anything to try to get you back. In their desperation, they'll express how they fear they've lost you forever, how they can't bear the thought of someone else being with you. But here's where the dynamic shifts. The fear that brings them back to you is a reflection of your importance, even if they failed to see it before. Now, they understand just how much you meant to them, but the power has shifted. You're no longer the one waiting for their affection or attention. The control is now in your hands. Their fear is a reminder that you hold the cards, that you get to decide whether or not they have a place in your life again. This realization is humbling for them, and they know that any return is going to be on your terms. When they come back, it's not enough for them to simply ask for forgiveness or make empty promises. You deserve more than that. Fear might drive them to return, but it's their actions that will determine whether they truly deserve a second chance. Don't settle for temporary fixes or shallow apologies. If they truly want to be part of your life again, they need to show it through consistent, meaningful actions, not just words. They need to prove that they've learned from their mistakes and are committed to treating you with the respect, appreciation, and equality that you deserve. Remember, you hold the power now. Their return is not guaranteed just because they ask for it. It's up to you to decide whether their plea is genuine or if you've outgrown them entirely. You're in control of your own future, and if they truly want to be a part of it, they'll have to earn their place through more than just fear-driven desperation. Let their fear remind you of your value, and never settle for less than what you deserve. Every emotion they feel, rejection, emptiness, curiosity, reflection, and fear, reminds them of your value. Your absence is not a weakness, it's a statement of your strength and worth. You are the one worth chasing. Now, reflect on who truly values your presence. If they don't, maybe it's time they experience your absence. If you enjoyed this video, comment one below, share, and subscribe to the channel for more empowering content. Thank you for watching.